So just a short announcement before we get into today's episode. Some of you have asked how you could support the show, which we really appreciate. So we've now set up a Patreon page. And Patreon is an easy way for people to donate money to, in this case, our podcast. And if you become a Patreon supporter, of course, you're contributing to making the podcast possible. And you'll get access to bonus material like extended episodes, and of course receive our undying gratitude. So visit patreon.com/forestofthought for more information on that. Welcome to the Forest of Thought with me, Ingrid Rieser. In our quest to understand our universe, it's often said that we should try to place ourselves apart and outside our object of study, to be as objective as we can. But is it really possible to separate ourselves from the world we're trying to study? We depend on models and simplifications to aid our understanding. But are we mistaking those maps for the territory itself? Our guide for this episode is astrophysicist Ulf Danielsson.
In some very important and deep way, one could say that we are, in a sense, the way that the universe observes itself. You could imagine that matter in the beginning of times was mostly dead, and then through life it has sort of waken up to awareness of itself, and that's who we are. And it's a complete misconception to think that we are these impartial observers which are standing outside of the universe and just looks at it. There is no such viewpoint.
Ulf Danielsson is a professor of theoretical physics at Uppsala University, with a special research interest in dark energy and string theory. He's participated in countless radio and TV shows and written several popular science books on topics ranging from the history and philosophy of science to climate change. We met in a tucked away and hidden corner of Uppsala's botanical gardens, in the company of some fairly exotic plants and a cloudy autumn sky. I was thinking about when I was maybe around 12 or 13 years old, and I have a really clear memory of lying in bed and trying to imagine the moment before the Big Bang, and just being, surprised, or just noticing how that was impossible to imagine, because it was hard to imagine there being nothing. And then once you think that, you also realize how strange there is that there could be something.
I think that's even more strange.
It's even more strange, and how there can be from nothing come a something that's so vast, which is just really mind-boggling. So that's a distinct memory I have of this feeling. And so I was wondering if you remember when you started to look up at the sky and wonder what is this strange universe that we find ourselves in?
I don't think I can remember the very first moment I did that. The only thing I know is that I was very interested in basically natural science as a very small kid, and I used to be out in the forest and by the lakes and so on, looking for strange creatures already as 5 or 6 years old. But I have a very distinct memory as a 7-year-old that I sort of made more or less a kind of a secret promise that I should devote my life to astronomy and physics. So that was already at 7 years old, and I remember we were on our way home from my grandparents in the car, and I looked out through the window at the stars and sort of made this promise without telling anyone. So that's something which I really remember very, very vividly. But then I also have other really, very incredibly important experiences also further on. Like in 1976, when I was 12 years old, there was a big Comet West, that appeared. And that was sort of the first big comet for many years. And I had, from my parents, I have gotten a subscription to an American magazine on astronomy, and I could read about this big comet in that magazine. And then early one morning I planned to go out and take a look at the comet, and I remember it was very early and it was very cold and clear skies. And I went out, and first I didn't see anything. And so I was a little bit disappointed.
Were you by yourself? You're just by yourself?
No,
your parents were?
No, they were fast asleep. So I was out alone. And then I was walking, living in a small village, and I was walking along the dirt road just outside of our house. And then when it was a neighbor's house that actually was in the way. But then suddenly, when I walked a little bit, then I saw the comet on the other side of the lake, above the mountain. And it was such an experience. So I remember that I slipped and fell when I ran back to get my telescope and have a look at it. So that was really something else. Absolutely fantastic.
It seems also like this curiosity and wonder is something that is still kind of your driving force.
That's absolutely so. So it's really rooted in that. I mean, the real world and the curiosity about that, and try to understand it and to learn as much as possible about it. So it's really something which is very, very existential for me. So it's not just something that you do for a living, but it's something that you partly live for instead, in a sense. So it's something which is really central to who I am and what I want to do.
What does it do to kind of the way you view, just the way you go about life when you spend a lot of time looking at these huge, astronomical, literally, questions?
Well, I'm not sure that it helps in any important way. It might give some meaning to everything, but then in your daily life, I don't think it doesn't make you better or worse than anybody else. But it keeps you going.
Yeah. So you spend a lot of time trying to understand the universe, the natural world, but then from what I see of what you've been writing also lately, you're also looking at how we try to understand the world, like the process of coming to know it.
And in fact, the point is that these are things that you cannot disentangle. It's not that these things are independent of each other, but in fact, something which I have been realizing more and more, maybe that might be something that I didn't quite understand in the beginning. Then it was more that this was things which were independent of us and so big and interesting from that point of view. But then I've realized more and more that that's not really how it works, and the fact that the way that we view the world is very much rooted in who we are, and the fact that we are not these independent observers, but we are in the middle of everything, and the world that we see, the universe around us, we filter all of that through our organic senses, and in some very important and deep way, one could say that we are in a sense the way that the universe observes itself, in a sense. You could imagine that matter in the beginning of times was mostly dead, and then through life it has sort of waken up to awareness of itself, and that's who we are. And that means that you cannot really disentangle these things. It's all tied together, and it's a complete misconception to think that we are these impartial observers which are standing outside of the universe and just looks at it. There is no such viewpoint. It is really fundamentally matter itself through us which observes the universe and itself. So. And this is something which is important also for me in my attitude to science and the universe, but also to ourselves.
Well, there's so much in what you said just now, so let's unpack it a little bit. So so we can't. Well, first of all, we cannot put ourselves outside the universe to observe it, because we will always be observing it through the human body and mind.
And using the same physics, in a sense, that we want to describe, but it's essential for us being here.
Yeah, exactly. So we cannot step outside that,
No.
and so instead, what we do then to try to understand the world, you say, is to create models.
Yes.
Usually without thinking about it, but models and maps, and but these vary, of course, from the very unconscious and simple to the complex and abstract.
Absolutely.
And I think that it's fairly obvious or easy to say that the map is not the territory. But
Absolutely.
So if that feels obvious to a lot of us, what is it that we're missing? Why is it that we...
I think we're always missing that somehow. I mean, it sounds obvious, but nevertheless, we have this tendency to identify our models with reality itself. And this is something which is particularly true in the kind of science that I'm doing. And I think also that most people who are interested in, let's say, physics and this more fundamental physics that I'm doing, is also kind of buying that way of looking at things. So you think that the natural laws that we discover, or rather I should say that we formulate to describe what we see, and these natural laws, which are formulated using mathematics, you tend to identify them with the world itself. So that in fact you might even start to think that these mathematical formulas, these mathematical laws, they are even more real than the world. And it's these mathematical natural laws which somehow exist outside of the natural world, outside of the universe, and then sort of goes in and affect and steers and tell matter what to do. In a way which is very similar to how we, if we have a religious point of view our souls to be something which exists outside of the material world, and then through our free will go in and manipulate it. Or it might be God which is outside of the creation and manipulates it. So all of these different ways of thinking, they are really the same thing. I mean, you are getting so impressed by the way that you, through, for instance, mathematics, can describe the world, that you identify it with mathematics. While what we are doing in reality is, of course, just to construct models using whatever tools that we have. And all of these tools are, of course, again, rooted in our organic brains. That's from where they emanate. And again, this is not something which is it's not just scientists which makes models. We as human beings, as the animal that we are, make models all the time in order to move and try to predict the future and whatever we do. And in fact, one could even say that that's what, in a sense, defines what life is. Life in general need to make models in order to predict what happens, so that you can adopt your behavior so that you survive. I mean it's
so
true.
You're saying that we couldn't live without models. That's not at all what we're saying. It's...
I mean the models are always there. I mean even a flower has some kind of models in its inner that it knows. It has a mechanism which makes it survive. Winter is coming and things are happening. The sun is coming out. It's dry in the earth. There are various behaviors which are adopted to this, and in some sense that is just a matter of models which are used by these living creatures. And this has grown into more complex models, which is what our science is. Well, complex in some sense. I'm not even sure it's more complex than what we are doing unconsciously, or what other animals or plants are doing. But it's basically just the same thing. You are trying to predict what happens. To bring order in a world which is maybe chaotic, you have to single out what is important really for me, and then I'm focusing on that and try to see what can that tell me about the future.
So, so that means that the problem isn't that we have models and that we use models. Rather, is that we don't realize that we're using them and we conflate them with reality. I mean, I was thinking about this when I was reading your book about maps and the territory, and how it's very interesting to imagine if you were moving, like when you go hiking in the mountains, you have a map and it'll show you, here's a peak over here, there's the marshes, here's a forest and stuff. And you can imagine having a map of a landscape or of a city, for example, where you're, what if the map shows you something completely different? Like it shows you where everybody who's recently had a heart broken is living, or or where all of the materials that make up a city, where they came from, for example, or
exactly.
I don't know. And then that would of course change how you move in the city, and then that will also change kind of the world that we are in fact helping to create or to participate in. And I mean, I studied economics, so in economics I feel it's very obvious that economics, some say that economics also has a kind of physics envy, that they're trying to make economics more like physics, and that you can predict things through and it's not even modern physics, it's like the old kind of physics, but that you can predict things through more linear models of human behavior, but that of course based on the models you create, then you will also change human behavior accordingly, and so that's a bit different in social sciences, for example, than in the natural sciences. But would you say that also the way that we create models and understand the models within the natural sciences will also change our view on the world and how we participate in the world?
I think definitely it's like that. That doesn't mean that there's some kind of relativism, that you can view things in any way that you wish and there is no objective truth. I mean, okay, the word objective truth is a little bit problematic, but I mean the point is that there can be many different models which are captures different aspects of the world. I mean, you can be focusing on different aspects, like your example with the map of the city. And all of these maps, they are correct. It's just that they are focusing on different parts of the truth. And the same thing is, of course, true in science, that we might choose a certain perspective on the world. There are certain things that we choose to be more interested in, and then we are ignoring other aspects. And this is, of course, particularly true when we want to apply science and try to create a civilization. And then we can focus on certain facts and say that, okay, if I do this, then this will be helpful because I can get energy and I can do all of these sorts of things. And then you ignore other things which are as true, like pollution, for instance. I mean, that's also a scientific fact. I mean, that if you do this, it's not only good for you, but there is also bad consequences. And depending on how much of this knowledge you are paying attention to, your worldview will be very, very different. I mean, if you ignore sort of the pollution part of it, then it's obvious that you should act in a certain way, and you can feel like you are in total control of the world. You can do all of these things and there will be no consequences. While if you take these other things into account, your worldview will be very different, and what you can do will be limited by that knowledge. So from that point of view, it's quite clear that scientific knowledge is not. You can, by ignoring certain facts, you can, and focusing on some, you can build up a worldview which is very different from if you make another choice. And again, it has to do with the fact that models are always simplifications. And they have to be like that, because you cannot take everything into account, because that would be like building another copy of the world, which would have all its aspects. So the key is to try to focus on what is actually important. What do I need in order to achieve this or that goal? And you can also put it down at the more of a more biological level. It's clear that different animals have a very different view of the world. You have different kind of senses. You don't see the same wavelengths. You might have other senses than we have, and the view of the world that we have is very, very different than from the famous example of Thomas Nagel of a bat. You can never really know how it is to be a bat or any other animal, and it doesn't mean that our view of the world is more true than these other animals' view of the world. It's just that they're picking out other pieces of information that they need to maneuver in their Umwelt, as it's sometimes called, or as Ulf philosopher. Even at the biological level, it's clear that you can have many different models of the world, which are always they're useful or limited in their way if you want to survive in this world. But it's also true at the level of a civilization, that one cannot say that science always give you. It can be that science in its very well defined limited way can give something that you can call a fact. This is a fact and this is a fact. But that doesn't mean that it's obvious what you should do always, because there could be other facts which you have ignored, or science can sometimes be wrong. So it's very, very difficult. Sometimes it's made easy when you listen to the media, that either you're against science, you're for science, and if you're for science, then it's obvious what the answer is to all the questions we might have. And it's not that easy.
Yeah, and maybe there's kind of the need for a certain kind of humility as well, in terms of
absolutely
how much we think our models encompass. Because as humans, I guess a pretty unique thing for humans compared to other animals is that we can sort of consciously think about which model am I using now, and what kind of things might I be missing, even though we maybe don't do this so successfully a lot of the time. But you could still try on different glasses or whatever you want to call it, and see what things are appearing and what things disappear depending on which maps or which models you use. And so in that sense we are a different kind of species, but maybe also that what we forget a lot of the time is that we kind of feel like we're at the end of history and now we've kind of figured most things out, and there's just a few details to kind of fill in, while we think that probably 300 years ago they maybe thought the same thing, that they're like, the people who lived before us, they didn't really understand, but now we have it figured out. And so do you think that we're kind of in 100 years we'll be thinking, oh wow, they really didn't get it, what was going on?
Yeah, I think that we are always very quick in pointing out the limitations of other animals, and they are so stupid, and then they cannot do this, and we can do all of these things, and we are really the crown of creation somehow. It's much more interesting to think about our limitations, which are very obvious. And again, it's so clear if we try to not think of ourselves as these free-flying spirits that can sit outside of the universe and just watch it, but rather realize what we are, and the fact that all that we think and everything that we are and all our subjective awareness and everything is within this body, not necessarily as within this organic brain, but we also need the body in total to relate to the world around us and actually to think. If we realize that, then we also realize that there are certain limitations. It's clear that the brain, which with the mass of between 1 and 2 kilograms, clearly, why should that be able to understand everything in this big universe? Why should that be sort of the threshold that you need to go beyond in order to be have this total power? Clearly not. It must be that we from this perspective of there might be other creatures on other planets which are way beyond us and would think that we are pitiful in our limitations of thinking and planning and making models and all of that. And I think it's important to have that perspective. And it, of course, also means that we are, even within our physical limitations, I'm sure that we are not at the limit of what we can do. I mean, as science progresses, I'm sure that we will be learning much more than we know now. So that kind of humility, I think, is very, very important. Not only in the view of coming generations and what can be achieved, but also that there is an inherent limitation in us as organic beings. And also that also means that science is not something which is independent of us, but it's really, in some sense, it's a social science as well, because it's about trying to understand the universe and those aspects of it that are important for us and that we can understand. So it's a very human picture of the universe that we are trying to build up, and that doesn't make it less interesting. In fact, to me, it becomes even more interesting, the fact that we are in the middle of everything, and we consists of the same matter as builds up the universe, and it makes my relation with the universe becomes much closer due to that, rather than anything else.
How do you the importance of the organic body in this process of sort of making meaning of the world? How did you kind of come to that realization or conclusion?
Well, I think I probably started out with, first just the curiosity of everything, which was it was rooted in, feelings in a sense, and awe, and existential questions that I wanted to find answers to. So it was sort of based in that. And then I realized that the way forward to understand as much as possible about the universe and physics and all those questions which I connected to the sort of the most fundamental questions that you can raise. The way forward, I discovered, was mathematics. And luckily, at 7, when I made the secret promise, it was also clear to me that I thought that mathematics was rather fun, and it was easy for me. So, that was the perfect mix. So, and then I went ahead along those lines. But then I guess that as the years passed, I also realized, the limitations of all of it. And the more I thought about mathematics as such, and the way that science is done, and the human role in all of it, and the accidents of history and everything, I think I realized that so much of what I do as a physicist, a scientist, and this model building is not very sophisticated, actually. It just builds on the same old thing. You count on your fingers, basically. That's the root of mathematics. It's your body.
When you're doing string theory, it's the same thing.
It's just the same thing. It's just that you have a notational tool, and you have things that you can learn, ways, tricks, basically, to organize all of these complicated thoughts in an efficient way. But when you trace everything back, you end up not in some serene sphere outside of the universe together with a Platonic world together with God or anything like that. That's not where you end up. But when you trace everything back, you end up here. In your own body, counting on your fingers, and you think of time as being forward or backwards, and it relates to your own motion in the real world, and everything goes back to that. And clearly, when you think about it, where else could it start? Because that's where we are, and this is our starting point. And And I think that connects also in the way that I got interested in science, because it started from where I was, in the middle of the universe, discovering a dark, mysterious sky that I wanted to learn more about. And that's also the I think the usual point of view, and which also leads to the right questions, that we are here as human beings in a universe which is mysterious, and we try to work ourselves outwards from where we stand and try to understand more and more and more. But it also always needs to be carried back to us to make it comprehensible. And we can never have this point of view where we are standing on the outside and looking at the universe from the outside. We are always in the middle of it.
This thing of being sort of in the middle of the universe and in the middle of everything, and also accepting that we are that we are a human body on the earth. It makes me think of this. I almost can't say this word, phenomenological researcher. I was like, maybe I shouldn't bring this up because I won't be able to say the word.
But you have said this, so I don't have to say it.
Yeah. I think that the founder of phenomenology, Edmund Husserl, he wrote something also about this question of being in the middle of everything, that also our experience of living on Earth, on the planet Earth. And I mean, obviously that's common for everybody that is doing science.
Absolutely.
And everybody else that we know of at the moment.
Yeah.
Everybody's living on planet Earth, and how we maybe underestimate the extent to which all of our understandings of of science or of the universe are so bounded by the fact that we're living on a planet that's and in a universe that's, it's three-dimensional, and there's a certain feeling of time, and the sun rises and the sun sets.
Oh yes.
And how this bodily experience of life on Earth, how that was related to what you were saying before, that all of that we try to understand when we are moving sort of further and further out into the reaches of space or into abstraction, that we will always be moving from that sort of ground zero, or that base, which is our bodily lived experience. And I think that maybe for a lot of people or a lot of scientists, this can feel like sort of like a failure or something, like that you're kind of this sadness maybe of being limited by the biological realities, and so you want to try to, this idea that we're evolutionarily kind of handicapped by our bodies, and that we can improve them, by help of machines or AI or whatever. But in fact, what I appreciate about what you're saying is that we instead can just embrace it, and through that we can actually become better at what we are trying to do, instead of ignoring it and being sort of in denial about it.
I think so too, because otherwise where would the limit be, really? I mean, where would we be satisfied if we were going to sort of move along those lines and never just want to improve ourselves and so on? I'm not sure if that's really, well, I'm sure that that's not the way to do it. That in fact, as a civilization, we should rather, as you say, we should embrace who we are as biological beings, and also as a part of a natural world that we should feel some kind of connection with, and also Earth itself, and the biological life on Earth, that we should be proud of who we are, and not be sad, but rather happy that we exist at all in a universe which is so different from us. And in fact, we shouldn't, I mean, in a sense, I think it's very easy to rather say, turn everything around and say that, okay, if we look now out in the universe and see all of these dead stars and dead black holes, neutron stars and dead planets and everything, and then we see a living planet like the Earth, I mean, clearly it must be that this fragile Earth with its living beings must be much more worth than all of these other things that we are so impressed about. Just because something is fragile and something that you need to take care of doesn't mean that it's not worth as much. I mean, clearly it's just the opposite. So I think it's one is equating power and death with something which is sort of the worth something. I see it. I mean, I think it's just the opposite. And then it could, of course, be that there are other living beings on other planets in other parts of the cosmos that have reached further than we have, but that's not something which I find problematic either. I mean, let's take care of what we see and try to do our best and not be seduced into believing that we necessarily need to conquer the whole universe.
Yeah, and I think it's something sort of paradoxical about human beings, is that in one sense we are so powerful that we actually have the ability to sort of destroy most life on Earth.
Yeah.
Either through maybe climate change or more through nuclear warfare, or probably a couple of other ways as well. And so, we're powerful in a certain way at least. And then at the same time, which I think that you've really touched on when you have written about kind of climate change and the vulnerability of our planet, and we're so vulnerable as well as human beings. We're kind of living on this Earth with a tiny layer of biosphere around it, which is what makes it possible to, and also that life has created this environment for itself on a planet that would otherwise be too cold, right?
Yes.
Much too cold.
Yes.
And so it's like you say, this question of everything that is possible. A lot of things are possible, but a lot of things that are possible are not desirable.
Yes. I would say a few things. First, actually, I'm not sure. It's a horrible and interesting question. Could we actually destroy all life on Earth if we really wanted to do it?
No, maybe not.
I'm not sure.
No.
But
that's
what
good.
That's
good to know.
It's absolutely, it's very good. And even if climate change would go sort of as bad as it can, unless there is a runaway Venus kind of story, but ignoring that, then I'm sure what would happen is that civilization will collapse. We might go extinct. But in a few million years, I think life on Earth would recover and it will take a new course. So that's a kind of in some sense, a comforting thought. Even though I would hope that
you don't look so comforted.
No, I'm not. I hope for a better future for humanity. But as you say, I mean, the whole point. I mean, the main point is that we are vulnerable, and that's a perspective that I think that we should be more aware of. So I'm worrying about when one says that, we have to protect nature because nature cannot protect itself, and we are so strong and we have all this capability, and it's now up to us to protect the Earth. I think it's a wrong point of view. We have to realize that we will be the first victims to go, in a sense, if everything crashes. So again, it's a matter of humility, and we need to know that we are dependent upon this biosphere for our own good.
We're sort of talking about the material nature of things, and I was wondering if we could also because there is sort of this idea, if you're a certain kind of materialist, that we should be able to just also create humans or other life forms, artificial intelligences, that should be able to also have consciousness and a subjective feeling of what it's like to be. That robot or artificial intelligence. But I gather that you don't see that happening.
I don't think that's a very realistic possibility, not in the way that some people view it. I think there are, let's say that there are two examples of thinking physical matter, in a sense, that you might associate with thinking matter. One of them is, of course, just us. I think it's just a very simple scientific observation that we have a subject awareness, and we have an inner life, and we are thinking, and we feel that I am here and you are there. There is a difficulty, of course, to be absolutely sure that there is a consciousness inside of a fellow human being or inside a dog and so on, but we have there are many things that we are not absolutely sure about, and I think I'm absolutely convinced that you have a consciousness, and I am convinced that these birds that were flying around here, that they have a consciousness, and there is something, there is the way to be a bird, for instance. I'm completely sure about that. On the other hand, I have no idea how it works. It's a physical phenomenon, which I think is as real as the fact that you have the sun shining. It's a physical phenomenon in need of an explanation. I know pretty well how the sun can shine, but I know very little about how a human being can think and be aware of itself. And I also think that it's something which you need to, that's a very basic fundamental questions of science and even physics that we don't understand. It's a physical phenomenon, but something that we don't really understand. Okay, then let's compare with a computer. Is a computer a thinking machine? I don't think so. I think it's something that can do calculations, and it can do all sorts of things. In fact, I'm sure that one day you can build computers that can simulate a human being to some extent and even fool you. But a computer based on the kind of technology that we now have is a technology which is based on physics that we completely understand. There's absolutely nothing strange at all how a supercomputer can do its calculations and how you can program it, and so it's very, very complex. But there is no physical mystery in it, and clearly there is no reason to assume that there inside of that computer is what we call a subjective awareness. I see that as a true physical phenomenon. I don't see the need for such a physical phenomenon inside of a computer, and then I draw it. And this is, of course, my guess, but that's why I think it's a fundamental difference between the computer and us. Not to say that I understand what happens inside of our brains. I don't understand it at all, and I think that's the whole point. But with the computer, I understand it in principle. So to make more and more complicated computers of the kind that we now have will not lead to a consciousness or anything like that. It will be truly just be dead zombies which are walking around and might be able to simulate intelligent conversations and so on. But there's something which is lacking there. So that's really my point of view. Then, of course, there's one way which is very simple to create a consciousness, and that is to have a kid. So that's the simplest way of creating a conscious being. And sometimes it's one forgets sort of what sometimes you can do things in a much more simple way. and also if you just go a little bit further along that line, I think that, and this now it can get a little bit scary. I can imagine that through manipulation of biology, that you can do things which really involve true consciousness. and that you can also merge that with other types of technology. I mean, that's something which is conceivable, and something that you should be very, very careful with. And you should also be very careful with the fact that you can fool people. You can build a computer, build a robot which is not conscious, but you can trick someone to believe it's conscious. And so that's one danger. But then it's also this other danger where you get merged biology and other kinds of technology. On the other hand, to just add a further perspective on this, I suspect that what happens in biology is much, much more difficult to control than we actually think. It's so complex phenomena that we have less ability to really control it and make use of it than we actually think that we have. And that might also be true in the future, but I'm not really sure about it. But sure, there are dangers, but I think that those dangers, they are a slightly different kind than you might think.
Yeah, and I've also heard you say that we think that the dangerous thing is creating robots or computers that then are sort of going to be so much like humans that they'll sort of take over the world. But actually, an even bigger danger is maybe that humans start to identify as machines so much that we just become more and more machine-like and sort of abandon our humanness.
That could and don't really feel that we have lost anything. And that's something that we can worry about already today. I mean, I have kids in various ages, and I mean, computer games, mobile phones, and you are replacing the sort of the social interaction between another human being with something else that does something to us. And we should think carefully about whether we are on the way losing something, which, I mean, maybe I'm just old-fashioned. I'm afraid for something which is not the danger at all. That could be. But there is also the risk that we are losing things on the way. And I'm sure that we already in our society we have lost a lot, which other people in other generations and way back in history and other societies and cultures should really pity us for having lost, I'm sure. So one needs to be aware of that and not, I mean, try to take control over history and not just say that everything that will happen and then just let technology just do whatever it wants. That, I think, will be a serious mistake, and it can take us in various undesired directions. But we also need to have a society where people can actually sit down and think about these things and try to, with an open mind, actually feel that what is it that we really, what is worth something. I mean, what do we want, and not just think that we are just victims of a history which just goes on and we have nothing to do about it. I mean, it could be like that. Maybe nothing actually matters, and there's more or less a natural law that we will collapse and die, and everything will go under in a few decades. Who knows? It could be like that, but I hope it's not.
I suspect that it relates to how we decide to respond to the situation.
Yeah.
Isak told me that you, well, maybe it's just a myth, but that you would walk to work an hour and a half because that's the only time that was good for thinking.
It's not the only time that's good for thinking, but it's very, very efficient to walk a lot, which I do. So sometimes it has been examples where I took the bike, and then I realizing after 100 meters I don't have the time to bike to work today. I have to walk. So then I turned back, left the bike, and then walked, so that it could actually think efficiently and not just be out biking.
And I think, did you write that somewhere, that you have also a like a blackboard in your, like a mental blackboard,
yes,
so you can work things out?
Yeah, a little bit like that. Yeah, it's very small and it's not very
I'm
very
sure your
efficient,
blackboard is a lot bigger than my blackboard.
No, it's actually a bit sort of like this, but it's useful to have it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's good. You'll find further resources in the show notes, and if you want to support this show, please visit patreon.com/Forest of Thought. Our theme music is by Christian Sten at stoneproduction.no. Thank you so much for listening, and talk to you next time.